Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. 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 Wanderer, worshiper, lover, leaving. It doesn't matter, ours is not a caravan of despair. So come, come, whoever you are, come, come. 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 Shuva, 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 yet again come. Shuva, 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 yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, come, come. Come, whoever you are, come, come.
Welcome back, everyone. I did forget to announce, so I thank Hannah Carney for reminding me. We have a teen hour beginning at 1:15, so hopefully our teens have that link as well. Before we continue, I do want to read a couple of responses. As I mentioned earlier, we received hundreds and hundreds of responses to the Shalom cards. One person writes, "What have I learned? I've learned the importance of connection, patience, and action. Even in these difficult times of isolation and uncertainty, I still need to reach out to family and friends and stay involved with the broader world." And another wrote, "I've learned ever more so the importance of our human connection. I've learned to appreciate even more the smallest things, the color of a flower, a hummingbird in my garden, the beautiful blue sky, the tall green trees. I also know even more how important it is to help others less fortunate." And so I encourage you to continue your responses to these questions. Let's now continue in our prayer book on page 208 as we prepare for the words of Unetaneh Tokef. Once again, those ancient words which remind us that on Rosh Hashanah it's written, on Yom Kippur it's sealed, as we continue to write in our book of life. And so on page 208, our sovereign God of pardon and forgiveness, let these words of sanctity ascend to you. Let us proclaim the power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. Unetaneh Tokef.
Unetaneh Tokef, Kedushat Hayom, Ki hu nora v'ayom, Uvo tinasei malchutecha, Ve'yikon v'chesed kisecha, Ve'teishev alav be'emet, emet ki ata hu dayan, u'mochiach v'yodea va'ed. U'v'shofar gadol yitaka, v'kol dmama daka yishama, u'malachim yechafezu, v'chi השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתנו. בראש השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתנו. כמה יבואו וכמה יבראו. מי יחיה, מי ומי ימות, מי וקיצור, ומי לא וקיצור, מי ואש, מי ומי 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 ומים, מי וחרב, ומי וחיה, ומי ורעב, ומי וצמא, מי ורש, ומי ומגפה, מי ורש, מי ומי ומגפה, מי וחניקה, מי וסקילה. בראש השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתמו. בראש השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתמו. מי ינוח ומי ינוח, מי ישקיט ומי יטרף, מי ישלב ומי יתייסר, מי עני ומי עשיר, מי יושפל ומי ירום. בראש השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתמו. בראש השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתמו. ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה מעבירים את רוע הגזירה.
On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On Yom Kippur, it's sealed. How many will pass away from this world, and how many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted? But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving and charity, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. And before we continue with the words of Avinu Malkeinu, I want to see if this is going to work. Can I send a message to the camera to, even though I'm speaking, put the camera on Cantor Zell? Thanks. Because while she was singing Unetaneh Tokef, I noticed the gray on the ark right here, which is one of my favorite parts of the building, and sometimes we clean it up. What I learned is that those are fingerprints of each person that has touched that ark, every bar bat mitzvah, every parent who stands up there, a wedding couple. Those are the signs of life. It reminds me of a lesson I learned about scars I once shared, that we may get some scars in life, but scars are a sign of living. They're not a blemish. A corpse can't scar if one makes an incision into a corpse. A scar cries out life. Sometimes blemishes mean we've lived. But despite those blemishes, we return each year to say, I may have made mistakes, but I am here alive to strive to do better. And so let's now turn, thinking of those blemishes, sometimes seeing them quite vividly, to Avinu Malkeinu on page 252. Avinu Malkeinu Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, hear our voice. And then we'll listen, but we know it concludes Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vanenu, Ki ein banu masim, our parent, our sovereign, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love. If you're able, please rise.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol aleinu, ve'ol aleinu, ve'tapeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale dever, vecherev v'ra'av, me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale chotzah, umastin, me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, kodvenu b'sefer chaim tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, chodesh aleinu, chodesh aleinu, shana tova.
Avinu Malkeinu,
Avinu Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu. Shema Koleinu. Shema Koleinu. Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu. Choneinu vaneinu. Ki ein banu masim. Hasei manu. Tzedaka v'chesed. Hasei manu. Tzedaka v'chesed. Ve'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu. Choneinu vaneinu. Ki ein banu masim.
And let's be seated once again. And another message to our production team that sits in another room. Our 10 o'clock service became a little lengthy, and I had to remove 2 prayers that we would have recited and hear the voices of Rabbi Sapphire and our rabbinic intern, Ryan Lesner. And so I'd like to reinsert them now. And so if we can go to Rabbi Sapphire on page 292 so that we can hear her voice as well.
We stand in humility, conscious of our failings. Shema Kolenu, Adonai, hear our call. True sacrifice to God is a penitent spirit. You treasure a crushed and repentant heart. For you are close to the brokenhearted, and you give strength to a suffering soul. You are the healer of shattered hearts. You are the one who binds up their wounds. For thus says the high and exalted one, who lives forever, whose name is holy. I dwell in a high and holy place, but also with the downcast and lowly, to bring new life to despondent souls, to restore and revive repentant hearts. Ryan.
Return now, Israel, to Adonai your God, for you have fallen because of your sin. Take words with you and return to God. Ask the Eternal, forgive what is wrong, accept what is good. We stand in humility, conscious of our failings. We set before you the wrongs we have done. We trust in your compassion, for you know who we are. Shema Kolenu, Adonai, hear our call.
Our communal confessional continues, page 296.
Eloheinu, ve'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, tavo lefanecha tefilotenu, ve'al titala mitechinatenu, she'ein anachnu azifanimu kshe'oref lomar lefanecha. Adonai Eloheinu, ve'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, tzadikim anachnu ve'lo chatanu, aval anachnu chatanu.
Page 296, of these wrongs we are guilty. We betray, we steal, we scorn, we act perversely. We are cruel, we scheme, we're violent, we slander. We devise evil, we lie, we ridicule, we disobey. We abuse, we defy, we corrupt, we commit crimes. We are hostile, we are stubborn, we are immoral, we kill, we spoil, we go astray, we lead others astray. We continue in Hebrew, beating our chests, opening up our hearts. Hashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazanu, Dibarnu Dofi. Ay, 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 Hevinu, Vehirshanu, Zadnu, Hamasnu, Tafalnu Shaker. Ay, 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 Yatsnura, Kizavnu, Latsnu, Maradnu, Niatsnu. Ay, 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 Saranu, Avinu, Pashanu, Saranu, Kishinu Orev. Ay, 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 Rashanu, Shihatnu, Tiavnu, Tainu, Titanu. Ay, 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 If you're still standing, we can be seated. We continue, page 300.
Al-chet shechatanu lefanecha be'ones uvratzon, ve'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha be'yodim uvlo yodim. The ways we have wronged you under duress and by choice, and harm that we have caused in your world consciously and unconsciously. Al-chet shechatanu lefanecha bivli da'at, ve'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha britzat raglaim lehara. The ways we have wronged you through our thoughtlessness, and harm we have caused in your world through impulsive acts of malice. Al-chet shechatanu lefanecha bechozek yad, ve'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha b'zilzul chorim umorim. The ways we have wronged you by abusing our power, and the harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers. Al-chet shechatanu lefanecha b'yetzer hara, ve'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha b'kashut oref. The ways we have wronged you by giving in to our hostile impulses, and harm we have caused in your world through inflexibility and stubbornness. Al-chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chachash uvchazav, ve'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha b'kalut rosh. The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and the harm we have caused in your world by making light of serious matters. Al-chet shechatanu lefanecha b'siach tzipzotenu, ve'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tzarut ayin. The ways we have wronged you in our routine conversations, and the harm we have caused in your world through envy. Ve'al kulam eloah slichot salach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu. For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to
Ve'al kulam eloah slichot salach lanu mechal lanu
Al-chet shechatanu lefanecha begalui uvsater, ve'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha b'sinat chitam. the ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by hating without cause. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bifrikat ol, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'ma'achal uv'mishteh. The ways we have wronged you by losing self-control, and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'gilui areot, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz halev. The ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality, and harm we have caused in your world by hardening our hearts. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'neshech uv'marbit, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'masa uv'matan. The ways we have wronged you through greed and exploitation, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'hirhor halev, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chilut. The ways we have wronged you through our innermost thoughts, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chapat shochad, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chilchul Hashem. The ways we have wronged you by offering or accepting bribes, and harm we have caused in your world by profaning your name in public. Ve'al kulam Elohas lichot, slach lanu mechal lanu, kaper lanu. For all these failures of judgments and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, and lead us to atonement.
Ve'al kulam Elos lichot, selach lanu mechal lanu, kaper lanu. Ve'al kulam Elos lichot, selach lanu mechal lanu, selach lanu mechal lanu, kaper lanu.
So on Yom Kippur, I always like to share a story from my travels. And so on my last temple trip to Israel, right before the pandemic, one of the members of the group actually said to me, "Rabbi, I hope I make your Yom Kippur sermon this year." And so, Lauren, here we go. In truth, it's hard to believe that it was only last November that I was traveling through Israel with 33 members of our synagogue for a first-timers trip to Israel. And we were overlooking the old city of Jerusalem, and I'm hoping we can take a look. Do we have the picture? Perfect. At least on my screen, you can see it on the right side. We're overlooking the old city, and I said to the group, "Can you see the white dome sticking out from all of the buildings?" It's a little hard to see amidst all the buildings, but it's over there. It's the Horva Synagogue, to the right of the dome, the largest synagogue in the entire old city. Let's take down the slide. It's made of beautiful Jerusalem stone, but it didn't always look that way because in 1948, Major Abdullah El-Tal, the commander of the Jordanian Arab Legion, told his troops to get the Horva because it was the last Jewish stronghold in the entire old city. And a few days later, the Jordanians rushed in and occupied the old city, and at the end of the war, they blew up the synagogue, a symbol of their dominance. And you can see a picture right here. The beautiful dome is now rubble. And the rubble remained there for the next 19 years, until 1967, when the Israelis regained the old city and soon built an arch that I'd like you to see. because some of you may remember it. There's the picture. I remember as a teenager walking by it many times. I always thought of it as a rainbow, but it was actually built by Israel to show where the beautiful dome once stood. It was actually the bottom of the dome itself. Let's take down the picture. The dome that stood in the old city, the largest and one of the most beautiful synagogues in the entire country. And the arch remained that way until 2010. Here it is, when the entire synagogue was rebuilt. So let's remove that picture now. That synagogue was built more beautiful than ever before. And I know it was built in 2010 because it was then that the architect of the Horva synagogue traveled to a quarry deep inside the Negev desert to choose the specific stones that would adorn the dome of the Horva that would ultimately come to symbolize the Jewish quarter of the old city. And it was when that architect went to that quarry in the Negev desert that he met another architect who was building another beautiful synagogue. And that was our architect, who was choosing our stones for our building, our Beth Elohim. So here I am in Jerusalem, and I'm saying, you see the Horva synagogue? It should look familiar, because there are only 2 synagogues in the entire world who were at the quarry that day choosing the same stones. The Horva and Temple Beth Elohim were sister congregations. Now get on the bus, we're going to the old city. And as I said that, a woman approached me. Her name, Rebecca Cohen. Sorry, Rebecca, I didn't warn you in advance. But she said to me, Joel, did you say that's the Horva synagogue? And I said, yeah, it's one of the most beautiful synagogues in the entire world. In fact, it's made from the same stones as Temple Beth Elohim. And she said to me, because Joel, you're not going to believe this, but I have something from the Horva. It's in my basement. It's a piece of scroll that my grandmother gave me decades ago. Okay, I'd love to see it when we get back to Boston, I told her, but now get on the bus. We're going to the old city. And we had a great trip. And when we returned to Boston, Rebecca brought the scroll. It was from a Torah. It was about 8 inches by 10 inches. We can show the picture. And it was burned on almost all sides. You can see the holes on the left side of your screen from the string that attached it to the next column. We can take the picture off. Alongside of that scroll, there was actually a small note next to it. And it said, taken from the Horva synagogue, from Mordechai Caspi. All right, Rebecca, that's interesting. Because you know the street we were standing on when I showed you the Horva synagogue? That was called Caspi Street, named for a famous Zionist, Mordechai Caspi. You just might have something here. And so that afternoon, I called Jerusalem. I called my colleagues, I called my connections. I explained what was in my office. And a few days later, I received an email from the Office of the Reconstruction and Development of the Jewish Quarter, an organization I never even knew existed. But it said, Dear Rabbi Sissenwein, can you bring us the scroll? Now, that would have been a lovely note had I lived in Tel Aviv or Haifa. Can you bring us the scroll to Jerusalem? And then I realized I had another trip to Israel coming up a few months later, this time with a women's trip in early March. And so a few months ago, right before the world shut down, I packed up the scroll, I put it on my carry-on, and I went to Israel 2 days early before the group. I went 2 days early because I didn't know if I'd schlep this scroll all the way to Jerusalem, and they would say to me, "Thanks, Rabbi, but we've got 10 of these. Shabbat Shalom." And I also didn't want to waste their time. It was a short trip, and so I decided to go 2 days early. And on the first morning I was in Jerusalem, I walked from my hotel to the Old City and to the office of the reconstruction and development of the Jewish Quarter. And immediately I heard, "Shalom, Rabbi Sissenwein, Shabbat Shalom." It was Friday morning. And I replied, "Naim Ma'od, it's nice to meet you." And the man, tall man, beard, said, "Bo, come inside." And with two of his associates, he grabbed my hands and brought me into a room. And in that room was a large replica of the Horva synagogue. And then a small table, typically Israeli, a few cans of Coke, a bottle of water, and a plate filled of cookies and wafers. And he started to ask me about our synagogue. And so I told him about you. I told him about our programming and our deep commitment to Israel. And then I told him about our building and our architect and the quarry and the stones and our unique connection to the Horva. And then he's asking me for pictures of the synagogue, and I'm pulling them up on my phone. And finally I said to him, "But can I show you the scroll?" And he said, "Oh, yes, the scroll," as though it was an afterthought, which is not a good sign when you think you're bringing something important all the way from Boston to Jerusalem. But I pulled the envelope out of my backpack, pulled the scroll from the envelope, handed it to him, and he looked at the scroll, and he started to cry. He started to cry. And he said, "This is the only remnant we have from our destruction." You know, Rabbi, the word Horva literally means destruction. We're going to display this in our synagogue. We're going to call the Israel Museum and have the people who worked on the Dead Sea Scrolls help restore this. We need this scroll. It will help us remember our destruction. And most importantly, that out of destruction comes life. Rabbi, do you realize your life? You're standing here in Jerusalem, in the sovereign state of Israel, from a synagogue built from the same stone as the Horva, a synagogue that embraces kindness and love and Jewish life and Israel. You give us life. Thank you for giving us the scroll. Come, I want to share with you where it will go. And then, as we're about to leave, he says, "But Rabbi, can I ask you, how did you get it?" And I told him about Rebecca and our congregational trip. And I told him about our grandmother and the basement and Mordechai Caspi. And while I was speaking, he's looking down and he says, "This is amazing. I can actually make out the letters of the scroll, despite the burn. Only one column exists. And it's the story of Noah. It's the story of the world's near destruction. And it's the story about how it was built again." And ever since that moment, in the office of the reconstruction and development of the Jewish Quarter, with a small table, with a Coke and a bottle of water and cookies and a plate of wafers, I've been thinking a lot about Noah. Because after all, he was the first person in history to have to live in quarantine. No Netflix, no neighbors, no Zoom, no synagogue. Noah was stuck with his family and a whole bunch of animals, but in an ark. Not a boat or a ship, but an ark. It's an important distinction because what defines an ark, unlike a boat or a ship, is that an ark has no rudder. An ark just floats, riding the waves of uncertainty, not knowing what the future will hold. And my friends, at this moment in history, we are Noah. We are Noah of the Bible, but not the one from children's books or infant bedrooms, where cute giraffes poke their necks out of manicured windows, but the Noah of the Bible. I imagine there were bars on the windows that he had to place there to keep the animals in. It looked more like a prison at times. And Noah and his family were pushed around by waves, not knowing what the future would bring. No electricity, no cell phones, no neighbors, no Amazon, no ordering in. And so, what did Noah do? For what the rabbis considered over a year until the water subsided. What did Noah do? And according to tradition, what did Noah do? He fed the animals and he cleaned their cages. In other words, he prepared for the day when the storm would end. And that's what we need to do. Not wait, not be passive, not think that everything will return to normal, because we all know it won't. And we need to prepare for the day when the storm will end, so that like Noah, we can rebuild and begin again. We know we can't go back to normal. Nearly 1 million people around the world have died from this plague, many related to members of our own community. The repercussions of this storm are great and long-lasting. We all know a gap has grown in our nation, in education, economic opportunity, that may take years to rebuild. We cannot just go back to normal. And in truth, not everything before the storm was perfect anyway. According to the Torah, in the case of Noah, there was great violence in the land, problems in the world. And the story of Noah reminds us that we have the opportunity to rebuild it and begin again. Because this storm will end. And that's why last week I asked you to answer these 10 questions, inspired by the 4 questions asked in heaven by God, about how we live and what we've learned. And I hope you'll join us at 2 p.m. today as we discuss them in our hour of our response. But right now, I want to move us from the questions that we answered and our work that took place between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to the work that we have that will take place between Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, the important work ahead. And ask ourselves, how are we going to live? You see, these past 10 days, I've learned from you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses have come in. I have learned that some of you spend far less time in business meetings and business travel, and far more times on precious relationships you so value. I have learned that many of you spend far less money on shopping, on haircuts, on clothing, on dry cleaning. And I've learned that many of you spend a lot more money on tzedakah and giving to others and organizations that care for our world. I have learned that many of you are taking more walks, spending more time in nature, even planting gardens in your backyards for the very first time. And who would have thought that it would take quarantine and physical separation to know that many of you would spend more time reconnecting with old friends, college roommates, people from the old neighborhood. Some grandparents stuck in Florida feel more connected to their grandchildren around the country through Zoom than I've ever witnessed before. I have learned that many of you have become more politically active from home. You're getting more involved in voter registration drives, peaceful protests, and showing concern for our country. And I have learned that some of you are recognizing those who serve us behind plexiglass at CVS and the grocery store. People you never really noticed or thanked before. And I have learned that many of you have let go of the frustrations of virtual graduations and canceled vacations, and the many celebrations swept away from this storm. And I have learned that many of you have found a new appreciation for the simple things in life that always existed, but were so often not noticed. I have learned that you've gained a new appreciation for smiles, for hugs, and for a life stripped down to its barest essentials. And I have noticed that many of you are spending a lot more time in temple, in virtual services and learning programs. And together we are rebuilding our lives, stone by stone, constructing a life of beauty. I urge you not to wait, to begin the rebuilding process now, because one day we will return. A rainbow will appear on the horizon, and we will exit our arks, and we'll sit in the synagogue once again. One day, I hope you'll even join me in Jerusalem. I really, really want to show you that scroll. L'Shana Tova, good Yontif. May you be inscribed for a good year in the book of life.
May your days be full of wonder, and may your nights be full of stars. May you dance at every party, and may you learn to love the scars.
I've seen life through colored windows, and I've seen life through prison bars. I have slipped down wooden rainbows, and I have learned to love the scars.
Sometimes the midnight train don't roll in till after the dawn, and when that whistle blows, you hum along a sweet soft song. And that's when the blues creeps down into your bones, and you know you're not afraid, 'cause any road will lead you home.
every day is a new beginning. When you open up your heart, and you will laugh just like a baby, and you will learn to love the scars, and you will learn to love the scars.
Noah, a couple days ago, you texted me that song. I had never heard of it. Who sings it?
It's the late songwriter John Kilsner wrote it.
Thanks. Thank you both. Let us now begin to conclude our morning service with the words Hayom Ta'amseinu. They can be found on page 318. But before we conclude, let me remind you our TGIHH service is at 12 o'clock, coming soon, for our families. At 1:15, our high school program. At 2 o'clock, our hour of our responses, where we share our learning as we prepare for tomorrow. Then at 3:30, our service of healing, led by our Cantor Emerita, as well as Cantor Zell and Noah Aronson. And then at 5 o'clock, we'll return to the sanctuary for our afternoon service and service of Yizkor. At 6 o'clock, we'll conclude with our Ne'ilah, our final service. The sounding of the shofar should take place at around 6:20, in which we'll have Havdalah as well. And we invite the children on Zoom to get on the screens so that we can end our day together with that sign of life, of the embrace of tomorrow. So let's now conclude with the words, strengthen us this day, bless us this day, exalt us this day, show us kindness this day, inscribe us for a life of goodness this day, hear our cry, give us strength. Let's conclude.
Oh, amen. Amen. Oh, amen.
Hayom Ta'amseinu, amen.
Hayom tivarchenu.
Amen.
Hayom tigadlenu.
Amen. Hayom Tidrashenu Letova. Amen. Hayom Tichtavenu Lechaim Tovim. Amen. Oh, amen. 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 Hayom Ta'amseinu, amen.
Hayom tishma Shabbatenu.
Amen. Hayom Titmechenu B'yamim Tzidkecha. Amen. 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 Hayom Ta'amseinu, amen. 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 Hayom Ta'amseinu, amen.
We don't conclude this service with the mourner's Kaddish because we're not finished. We're supposed to feel as though we're still in the middle. So hopefully we'll see you this afternoon. Perhaps we can open up the mics to wish each other a good Yom Tov. We'll see you real soon.